They say the prairie remembers everything, every footfall, every prayer whispered into its soil, every name carried away by the wind. I never believed that until the day Clara stepped off the train with a tear on her cheek, like sorrow itself had packed its bags and ridden west to meet me. I wasn't meant to be there. Wasn't meant to be waiting, not for a woman, not for anything. A man like me learns to live in the after the war, after the fire, after the wife buried beneath the sycamore tree on the North Hill. Love had become a story I no longer read, a sound I had no use for. Silence, clean, undemanding, had taken its place. But fate is a quiet thing. It doesn't crash down from the sky. It brushes your shoulder in passing, drops a seed in your coat pocket, and waits for the thaw. That morning, I found myself at the depot long before the train came. I told myself I was there to correct a mistake. My sister, Esther, meddlesome and sweet-hearted, had sent off a letter under my name to some mail-order bride agency. I discovered her deed too late, her final attempt to stitch me back together with someone else's thread. The idea curdled my stomach. The thought of a stranger arriving to share my roof, expecting warmth I no longer owned. It felt cruel, dishonest. And yet, I stood there, boots planted in red clay, hands in my coat pockets, heart stubbornly quiet. The train came in with the mournful groan of something ancient and aching. Steam boiled around the platform, and people scattered like wheat before the scythe. She appeared through the mist, a silhouette at first, narrow shoulders, gloved hands holding a modest carpet bag, her hat pinned too tightly as if to hold her upright. Then I saw her face, dust-streaked, pale from travel, eyes wide with searching. And the tear, not weeping, just one tear, clinging stubborn as a raindrop on the edge of a leaf. She wasn't broken, not exactly, but something in her had bent far and recently. I should have turned away, should have let the station master deal with her, sent her on the next train east. But time slowed. The platform faded. All I saw was her, how she stood still in a world that rushed around her. How she carried her loneliness like a fine coat, well-worn, dignified. "Mr. Silas Cade?" she asked, voice soft but steady. I nodded, my voice caught behind ribs that hadn't held breath in weeks. "I'm Clara Whitlock," she said. "I believe you're expecting me." The sound of her name was like water poured into a dry cup. Still, I hesitated. I could have denied it, could have turned on my heel, said it was all a mistake because it was. But I didn't. Instead, I stepped forward, took her bag, and tipped my hat. "Reckon I am now." We rode back to the homestead in silence. The buckboard creaked under the weight of things unsaid. The land unrolled around us in browns and grays, the last breath of autumn still clinging to stubborn leaves. She sat straight beside me, fingers curled in her lap, eyes catching every fence post and windmill like she was memorizing the world that had claimed her. "You don't have to talk," I said eventually. "Not if you don't want to." She nodded once. Then, quietly, "Do you have ghosts?" The question startled me. I glanced over. Her eyes were on the horizon. "I might," I said. "Don't talk to him much." "I think I brought one with me," she murmured, almost too soft to hear. "He clings to the hem of my coat." I didn't ask what she meant. Some pain don't require explanation. By the time we reached the house, the sky had darkened. The place stood quiet and plain. 2 stories, peeling paint. The porch stooped like an old man in the wind. I hadn't swept it, hadn't prepared anything but the spare room and a pot of beans left simmering on the stove. I hadn't expected to want her to stay. Inside, she removed her gloves slowly, methodically, as though preparing for battle. Her eyes scanned the room, noting the worn floorboards, the empty mantel, the photograph of a woman with dark curls tucked in a corner shelf. "My late wife, Annie." "I'll take the small room," Clara said, setting her bag down near the stairs. "You don't owe me anything. We can keep this simple." I couldn't find the words to argue. Couldn't even offer her welcome. Just nodded and lit the oil lamp. Later, after supper, I caught her standing in the back doorway, looking out across the fields. The wind played with her hair, lifting it like grass before the rain. I stepped behind her, but didn't speak. She said, "Back in Ohio, they said I was foolish, that a woman with ruined prospects ought to fade quietly. I wanted to believe I still had some say in where I ended up. You do, I said. She turned to me then, and for the first time since the depot, her face broke. Not in grief, but in defiance. A flame in the eyes. A dare. I didn't come here to be pitted, Mr. Cade. I met her stare. Then you won't be. For a heartbeat, we stood in the frame of the open door, the prairie stretching wide behind us like the rest of our lives. The wind howled low, a sound between warning and song. Then a sudden gust slammed the door open, rattling it on its hinges. Clara flinched, reaching instinctively for something unseen. I caught her wrist, gently steadied her. Our eyes locked. Close now, closer than we've been all day. I'm not him, I said, the words spilling before I could cage them. Whoever he was, whatever he did. Her chin trembled just once. Then she nodded. In that small storm of wind and breath and unshed tears, something unspoken passed between us. Not love, not yet, but a flicker of something real, something living, in a house where silence had reigned too long. And for the first time in years, I didn't dread the morning. Mornings came early on Cadeland, the kind that didn't ask how you slept or whether your heart ached. The prairie woke with labor in its bones, and so did I. But now, there was another set of footsteps moving through the cold hush before dawn. Hers. Clara rose before the rooster, as if sleep were a luxury she'd long forgotten. I heard the gentle clink of crockery in the kitchen, the soft scrape of a broom over wood. Not out of duty, not for show, just quiet order, as if restoring small corners of the world gave her peace. She moved like someone raised to never take up too much space. But every day I noticed her more. Not in the way a man notices beauty, though there was that too, but in the way you start to miss something before it's even gone. She never asked questions, not even when I returned late from the pastures with mud on my boots and a weight in my shoulders. She didn't ask about Annie, though I saw her eyes linger on the photograph each time she passed. Respectful, not curious. That silence both relieved and unnerved me. It was easier to be haunted when no one tried to pull back the sheet. One evening, I caught her in the barn, feeding the horses with practiced hands. She'd rolled her sleeves up past her elbows, revealing thin arms freckled from childhood sun. I didn't announce myself, just watched her from the doorway as she murmured soft reassurances to old Bessie, my most irritable mare. She bites, I said. Clara didn't flinch. Only if you flinch first. I stepped inside, boots crunching over straw. You handle horses? I handle what needs handling. The words weren't sharp, just simple truth. She turned, brushing dust from her skirt, and for the first time, smiled, small and self-contained, like a candle flickering behind glass. I never said thank you, she added, for not sending me away. I never said you had to stay. No, she agreed. But you didn't say go either. There was no flirting in it, no invitation. Just something steadier. She spoke to me like a man, not a savior. I hadn't realized how much I missed that kind of honesty. As the days stretched, so did the town's curiosity. Abilene had no mercy for mystery, especially not the kind that smelled like scandal. Miss Liddy Boyle came calling under the guise of bringing jam, but her real cargo was gossip. She sat primly on our front porch, sipping coffee Clara had steeped with rose hips, eyeing every chipped dish and dusted corner. Such a brave girl, she said, voice syruped with suspicion, coming all the way from Ohio to live with a man she's never met. Some folks might call that foolish. Or desperate. Clara didn't flinch. I suppose it takes both to survive these days. I half expected her to be crushed by that kind of talk, but later, I found her behind the shed, hanging linens in the bitter wind. Her fingers were red from cold, and one knuckle was bleeding where the clothespin had snapped. You could have told her to mind her own damn business, I said, handing her my handkerchief. She wouldn't have heard it, Clara replied. Women like Liddy don't come to listen. They come to collect stories that already make sense to them. She looked up then, eyes glassy but dry. I won't be a burden here, Silas. Not to you. Not to this house. You don't owe me shelter just because I got off that train. Her voice caught at the end, just for a moment. That crack split something in me, quiet and violent. You're not a burden, I said, too fast, too rough. She turned back to the linens. Inside that night, I found my wife's old coat folded on the end of Clara's bed. It hadn't been touched in years. I kept it out of sentiment or self-punishment. I wasn't sure anymore. But now it lay there, clean, button-sewn, a lavender sachet tucked into the pocket. Not claimed, not worn, just seen. I stood there too long, the chill creeping into my boots before stepping back into the hall. Winter began biting harder. Nights grew longer. One evening, I returned from mending a split fence to find the stove glowing and the smell of venison stew thick in the air. Clara was sitting by the fire, her feet tucked beneath her skirt, a book of psalms resting in her lap. She looked up. "You're limping." Boot caught a root. Without a word, she rose, fetched a basin, and knelt before me. Warm water, a soft cloth. Her fingers worked without hesitation, untying laces, peeling back layers of leather and wool. She dabbed mud and blood away like it was nothing new. "I can manage," I muttered. "I know." She didn't stop, just kept cleaning. "You shouldn't," I started. She looked up. "Let someone care for you." The words hit like a shot. I couldn't answer, couldn't breathe. We stayed like that, her kneeling, me wounded, both pretending it was just a task. When she finished, she set the cloth aside, but her hands lingered, just barely touching my knee, the fabric of my trousers, like she was listening to something only she could hear. "You don't scare me, Silas Cade," she said softly. "But your silence does." I stared at her, this woman who had stepped off a train with nothing but sorrow and steel in her spine. She wasn't asking for love. She was asking to be seen, heard. The fire popped. Outside, a hawk cried once in the black. "I lost her giving birth to a child that didn't breathe," I said. "That's why I never remarried. I prayed for a son, got a grave instead." Clara didn't speak, just moved beside me on the hearth, close enough to feel. "I didn't come here to replace her," she whispered. "I came because I wanted a place where I could be more than what I was left with." Our eyes met. No promises, no declarations. Just two people, bent but unbroken, touching the edge of something unnamed. And in that moment, the silence didn't frighten me. It felt like permission, like breath. Spring arrived like a held breath finally released, all at once and without warning. The prairie shook off its frostbite and dared the sky to warm again. Buds peeked through hard soil. Calves bawled for milk in the fields. Life, stubborn and green, returned where death had long been master. Clara took to the rhythm of it. I watched her from the porch as she planted a line of sweet peas along the fence, sleeves rolled, a smudge of dirt across her brow. She worked like someone determined to belong, not in my home, but in the land itself. She spoke less those days, and I didn't push. Sometimes silence is the most honest kind of company. But in town, the murmur had turned from gossip to judgment. Liddy Boyle had seen enough to decide, and her tongue carried the weight of a gavel. Clara was too settled for a woman not married. Too quiet, too confident, too something that didn't sit right in the bones of folks who feared what they didn't understand. I caught wind of it at the feed store. "She's clever, I'll give her that," murmured Henry Pratt behind a crooked grin. "Came all the way west to find herself a widow with land. Wouldn't be the first to try it." "She ain't that kind," I said low and flat. Henry laughed. "You sure? We're just hoping." I left without my sack of seed, hands fists at my sides, jaw clenched tight enough to ache. That night, I found Clara sewing by lamplight, needle dancing through linen like it was born to fly. Her face was calm, but her fingers moved faster than usual. I knew the signs. A storm held behind the eyes. "You've heard," I said. She didn't look up. "Liddy brought me fresh eggs this morning." Each one cracked. My stomach coiled. "I'll speak to her." "No," Clara replied, setting the needle down. "You let it pass. Because if you rise to it, you make it true in their eyes. That's not justice. It's survival." The word tasted bitter in the air. "I didn't come here to make trouble," she continued. "I came here to be useful. I came here to heal. But healing makes people uncomfortable, Silas. Especially when it's a woman doing it for herself." I sat across from her, the old rocking chair groaning under my weight. "You don't have to fight alone." Her eyes met mine. Tired, brave, honest. "I've always fought alone." The words stilled the room. That week, I took her into town. Not to prove anything, not to parade her, just to buy a bolt of blue calico she'd eyed in the mercantile window. She hadn't asked, hadn't even hinted, but I'd noticed. As we stepped through the door, every pair of eyes turned. Silence folded around us, sticky and smug. Clara held her chin high, posture still as steel. She walked to the counter and laid her hand on the fabric. "I'll take 2 yards, please," she said, voice steady. The shopkeep, old Mr. Jesper, paused, then nodded. "Fine choice." The tension in the room shifted. Not gone, just cracked. But on our way out, Liddy stepped in front of the door, parasol in one hand, spite in the other. "Miss Whitlock," she said, saccharine and sharp. "Still playing house out there, with no ring and no preacher. Some might call that living in sin." Clara didn't flinch. She stepped forward slowly, eyes unblinking. "Some might call it surviving what you never had the courage to face yourself." Gasps rose around us like startled birds. Liddy blinked, lips parted, but no words came. I opened the door and let Clara pass through first. As we stepped into the light, the sky cracked with distant thunder. A storm was rolling in, not just clouds, but change. That night, back at the homestead, the rain came hard. I watched it from a porch, whiskey in hand, the memory of Clara's voice ringing louder than the wind. Inside, she moved about the kitchen, folding the new fabric, humming a low tune I didn't recognize. I wanted to say something. I wanted to thank her for the defiance, the dignity, the fire she carried like a lantern through the dark. Instead, I spoke the one thing I'd buried deepest. I used to talk to her, I said. After she passed, "Annie," I'd sit on the porch and say everything I couldn't when she was here. Clara paused, hands still. I told her I was sorry for wanting a child so badly, for building a dream too heavy for her to carry. I said I wouldn't try again, that I wasn't fit. She turned, her face unreadable in the half-light. "I don't expect you to carry anything but your own heart, Clara. But if you ever want to rest it here." I didn't finish. Couldn't. She crossed the room slowly, took the whiskey glass from my hand, and set it aside. Her fingers brushed mine, gentle, knowing, firm. "I didn't come here to be saved," she whispered. "But I think we both came here to remember how to live." I leaned forward, forehead to hers, breath shallow with something holy. And in the stillness, with thunder rolling in the hills and the ghosts quiet at last, I kissed her. It wasn't fiery or wild. It was soft, earned, like a long-forgotten hymn hummed beneath the breath. A beginning, not a claim. When we parted, she smiled. Not the small candle flicker of before, but something full, something blazing. And for the first time, I knew the house was no longer mourning. It was waiting, waiting for the kind of love that doesn't come loud or certain, but shows up anyway, step by uncertain step, until the silence is no longer something you hide in, but something you share.